this isn't necessarily a team sport, but it is for us.
We're like a family.
Whatever it is, you run into that goal. You can do it by yourself or you can do it together.
Completely life-changing. I feel like I found my village.
So today you're at Brooks.
Yes.
But I want to go back into sort of your introduction into this world and into storytelling. So I'd love to go into the sort of roots of when did you start to fall in love with storytelling and how you could use it in different ways?
Good question. I mean, I think I've always been very visual focused, really love art and, visual design and all of those things. And then in college, somebody told me I was a really good writer. So I think that's when I first started realizing that, oh, I can express myself through words, And I think I took, I was taking journalism classes, advertising classes. I remember doing this project in college where we came up with this spot for a cleaning commercial where we had the woman like spinning around from like place to place. And that was really fun to come up with that idea. And actually I saw a commercial many years later that I was like, somebody that was in my group produced that. But I think journalism was really the place where I started to understand the power of a story. We had a project in one of my journalism classes where we had to do an investigative story. So we had to come up with an idea and then we had to research it and write the story about it. And there was this house on my way to class every day that had a bunch of garbage in the front yard. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something going on with that house because it was boarded up and it didn't seem right. So I started looking into it and it turned out it was owned by the university and they were violating all sorts of ordinances. And so I went to my journalism professor and I said, guess what I found? And ended up writing a story about it. And it was on the front page of the Daily Evergreen, I think is what it was called. And the university responded very quickly, they had to board it up even more. They cleaned up all the trash. So I was able to really see the impact of what a story like that could do and the change that it could create. So I think for me, it's, the change and the information. I like being able to do that. And just the emotion of it too, which is different than journalism in a lot of ways, but telling a story where I can feel it in my body has always been really rewarding. So I've had that in several projects I've done over the years.
Where did that sort of love of story and also that sort of developing fascination with journalism take you from there?
Well, I always really wanted to work in a magazine. And maybe this is partly where story comes from too, is I was obsessed with fashion magazines when I was a teenager, and I really wanted to go to New York and work in a magazine. I ended up working in a magazine in LA, doing an internship. And then after college, I had an opportunity to work at a TV station in San Francisco. And so I did that, and that's where I got introduced to production, which once I got that in my system, that wasn't going away. Sure you can relate. And so it was telling stories in a different way. So combining that visual and the storytelling. And so, I was able to work in journalism. I moved to Seattle, was working in broadcast journalism, and then moved into, working at a TV station is hard. They don't really care about your life. My husband, my now husband, we met there and similar situation for him. So I ended up going to work at a agency. It was a brand new agency. I was the first employee. So I had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different things and really wanted to bring video into that and keep producing. So I was able to do the first project that we did. I was telling someone about it last night, actually, was a story we did about Hurricane Katrina. And it was about a year after the storm. And one of our clients made these hurricane ties And when they had built a house there that had used these hurricane ties that had survived while all the other houses around it had been destroyed. And so that was a really powerful first project, to be able to take some of that journalism roots, that approach to storytelling into working with a client, a brand. Simpson Strong Tie was the brand. And how do we tell the story of what they're trying to do as a company and what their products do, and then do it in a way that is compelling and authentic and true, to this really terrible situation that had happened. So,
When you look at that experience, I think that the story example you gave is sort of long before we would like classify like brand storytelling as a discipline or
yeah.
as a field. Um, but when you were exploring that project, what did you bring from journalism that helped you sort of balance like a respect for the story with what the brand wanted?
Mhm. Well, we hired a production company that she was also a former journalist. So I think that helped. We just had a similar mindset in how we were approaching the story. And we really just wanted to be true to what the experience had been, and that it wasn't so much about the product. And I think it helped because Simpson Strong Tie also is very true to what their mission is as a company of building safer homes, protecting lives. And so I, I don't feel like we ever had a struggle between, well, we have to show the product and we want to tell this story. It just was a natural story to tell, about how their product had really saved lives in this case, and and we didn't talk about that as much. We just talked more about the experience of, it's been a long time, so I don't remember all the specifics,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
we interviewed people that had been impacted. We interviewed building officials. So we really tried to think about what was the full story. And I think that's maybe the journalism piece is who are all the characters, I guess, or who are the subjects in this story and in this experience that are important to be able to tell this of what we really want to tell. Um, so I think having a client that having that mission that was so true, really, it just fit well. So, yeah.
Um, you started this agency, you're
Mhm.
the first employee, so you're getting to explore a lot of things. Um, where does that take you? Like what do you start getting really interested in and trying to do more of because you have that ability to sort of jump in a bunch of
Mhm.
sandboxes?
Yeah, well, so at that time, video was not what it is today. And we had to convince our clients to let us to do, like the one with Simpson Strong Tie. I really had to talk them into doing that story and how this was a powerful way to tell this story in New Orleans. And so they saw the power of it and they became a regular video client. But we really had to sell it in, at that time. And that was before vertical video, all of that. And so, and that was what I brought with me from my previous jobs. And so continued to build that out for sure. Got to do a lot of other things, PR, pitching, which is always hard coming from the media to be on the other side of that. Um, I ran a bunch of events, so I kind of was able to do a lot of different things. But where I found my passion really was continuing to be in that video storytelling production, that visual combination. And so just really built that out in the agency the best I could. Did some crisis communications too, which I found is very interesting and a very challenging field. I had one particular thing that happened. One of our employees, his family was hit by a drunk driver. They had just had a baby, and his wife and the baby and his parents were out for a walk, got hit by a drunk driver at 3 in the afternoon. His parents were killed. His wife and son were permanently disabled. And it was a different way of storytelling and not something that I really expected to have happened in my life. And it was really important with him. Obviously, the media was very all over it. And with him, we really worked with him of how do you tell your story in all of this? Because they were all telling the story about what had happened to them. And he started to get involved in creating change, with the state legislature and the DUI laws, and was on a panel of a working group. And so that was a really harrowing, I don't know what the right word is, but an experience of how do I help this person tell their story, help protect them from all this craziness, create change, be supportive for them. Um, and so that was one really interesting experience that came out of that. Kind of a tangent from what we're talking about, but when I think about it, it really was having to be in this mode of how do I help Dan tell his story and help create change through that story, and we were able to do that. So that was very I don't know if rewarding is the right word, but meaningful, I guess.
You mentioned earlier, like those stories you feel in your body, and I feel like an experience like that. We often work in the advertising world, and I always kind of say, like, a lot of times we're not saving lives. We're putting things in the world that we really care about. We try to find stories that are important and will drive change, but a campaign like that where you're helping a friend navigate a really complicated thing and drive actual change at the same time, I feel like you would also learn a lot about bringing story into government organizations, institutions, things that can be very fact-based and cold a lot of the time. What were some of the things that experience taught you about storytelling and the power of it in sort of the real world?
I mean, there was definitely a very clear moment. I don't know. I think I was listening to something about it on the radio or something as I was driving home, and there was this very clear moment where I thought Dan has to be a voice in this story, and so that's why we went after that. And I think for me, it's always about authenticity and truth. And I'm not somebody that is ever gonna. I have no poker face. You're always going to know how I'm feeling. I'm very direct. I have a strong sense of justice. And so I think for that, it just felt really important for him. And then what I learned out of it is how do I tell this story while experiencing this real life thing that is happening to them? And so it wasn't, I could have easily just been his PR person, right? Which I was. Like, we had a big press conference, we set that up. We tried to set it up on our terms. But I also needed to be his friend and help him tell the story in the way that he wanted to tell the story. And so I think just learning to bring that empathy into my work, which I already have very, very, I'm an empath for sure. So I have that strongly anyways, but I think and I do feel like I bring that into everything that I do, even making a commercial, and it was always really important for me too, to work somewhere that I felt connected to what I was doing, then it was meaningful and impactful. I remember saying when I was leaving journalism, I don't want to just go sell can of Coke or something, and so the agency that I worked at was a social impact agency. So we were able to do a lot of that. And then, even now in my time at Brooks, we really are trying to create better lives for people and have them live healthy lives. And, there's so much mental health aspect to running. There's so many benefits that come from running. Yes, we're selling a product, but we're also, it's an experience and part of your life. And so that's really important to me to continue to do that.
What was the transition from the social impact agency into being on the brand side?
I have had conversations. I just had a conversation with somebody the other day about, what it's like to work at a brand versus an agency and, all of that. And they are very different experiences. And so when I first left the agency, I went to Expedia. And so I left this agency it was 100 people by the time I left. So it'd gotten bigger, but still not big. Went to Expedia, where it was this giant tech company. And I worked on the UX team there. So it was a bit of a different experience for me. And I guess telling stories in a different way. And it was an adjustment, I think, just going from working at the smaller agency where I had a lot of input into things and was, one of the leaders in the company to just being someone on a team that had to execute work, So I think that was the biggest thing. And I found very quickly that working at a tech company wasn't really what I wanted to do. But I did still feel that Expedia had that travel. It was, I'm a big traveler. It's important in a lot of people's lives. So I do feel like I still was able to do something that was meaningful. One of the things that I did at Expedia is one of my legacies there, I guess, or takeaways, is that I wrote the text that said, check your local COVID restrictions, because I was working there when COVID started.
Right.
And we had to tell our travelers that, if you're traveling, make sure you check what's happening. And so that was an interesting experience to figure out how to, it took us 3 weeks or something to figure out how to write these 2 sentences. So I think it showed me that there's a lot of different ways to tell stories, and tried to bring that into even when we were doing UX and what's the experience for people. And then now at Brooks, I mean, you asked me the difference of working at a brand. I think when I was going into that, I went from telling a lot of different stories. We had a lot of different clients at C+E, into telling one story. And I was interested in doing that. I remember saying, oh, this is going to be nice to just go and focus on one thing and not have to be moving around in all these different things. And so that's been good to be able to learn how to do that. And, we shifted our brand expression. We went through a whole thing on that. I was part of helping shape that. So it's good to be able to dive into one thing and, focus on that. But even in that, we're still telling a lot of different stories in a lot of different ways. Every season we evolve what we're doing a little bit, and how we tell the stories of who we are at Brooks. So.
What is the philosophy of storytelling at Brooks? Like since you've come in and been a part of the team and learning the brand and what's been done before and where it wants to go, how are you looking at that framework now, and what are the types of stories you're trying to tell?
I mean, it's about the runners, right? It's about the people that wear our shoes, that wear our apparel, and the experience that they're having. And so we always want to convey that in what we're doing. We have a big tech component to our product, so we have to tell the tech side of the story of how the tech's going to benefit you as a runner as well. So that's been fun too, because we have a lab where we do testing, and we've been able to show that and focus on some of the tech aspects of things too. But really it comes down to the runners and what do they need from us and what is their experience as a runner.
How do you want Brooks to show up in the world? I feel like in the shoe space, there is a lot of different brands and there's a lot of different choices. And so, when you look at the brand and what you bring to the world, what are those values and what makes Brooks different? And then how are you trying to express that through the stories that you choose to tell?
I mean, I guess if you would ask anybody on the team that works with me, they would say it's the authenticity. To me, that's the most important thing, is how are we doing this in a way that's real? I just don't know how to be any other way, honestly. And so now we just are finishing up our seasonal brand campaign that's going to be launching soon. And we did it in a different way. We captured it in a more documentary style, and really went out and ran with real runners, told the story in a different way. And that's really meaningful to me. It's a really good combination of my journalism and my advertising, and bringing those two together. And I remember being in an early concept meeting about that, where we were talking about how we might want to show these run crews and real runners. And I said, well, let's just really do it docu-style. Let's do it that way. And we had to navigate that a bit, because we do need to show the product in a certain way. And, we are used to casting people from talent agencies. They're always real runners, but, they're paid talent. And so how do we go into this production in a different way? And so I felt like I was encouraging that a lot, and we had a lot of conversations about it. And in the end, we ended up doing it where we did go out and run with real run crews and captured it in the most docu-style way that we could while still making a commercial, and it created really great content. We made 2 30-second spots, and now we've made a long-form film with all the footage and interviews and things that we captured, which is a new thing for us. So that's been a rewarding experience. But yeah, back to your question, it's the authenticity, and no matter what concept comes across our plate, we're part of the creative team. We do sit in on early concepting and things, but mostly that comes from our creative director and the other creatives on our team. But we do have the opportunity to weigh in, and that's one thing that's always my authenticity radar is always there. And actually, one interesting thing that we've been doing is in our styling. Our stylist, in-house stylist, she's very much wants to, we have these looks that we have to show, of course, but she really wants to make it true to the person, whether it's, somebody from a run crew or a paid talent or one of our athletes. How do we make that look true to them? And so she'll do a lot of research on their Instagram and seeing what their style is, what kind of accessories do they wear. And even when they show up to the fitting or on set, we want them to come with their hair, how they would normally wear it, or what jewelry do you normally wear, and things like that. So even down to that level of it, we're thinking about how do we make this as authentic as we possibly can.
Knowing the campaign's not in market yet, I can't ask you questions based on having.
No, maybe by the time this airs.
Exactly, but having seen it, I can't go like, what?
Yeah.
But I would be curious to know, especially with someone with like a journalism foundation, been on the agency side and now on the brand side, when you're exploring these stories, like you describe your authenticity radar, but I'd be curious, like, how are you looking at things and going like, is that authentic to Brooks? How are you looking at it from like I feel like everyone wants to look at it from like a measurement standpoint, right? Like how are you looking at, is the docu-style stuff translating in the way you want it to in the world? So just be kind of curious, like how is that radar evolving as you're in the role you are now versus a journalist in the field?
I don't know. I guess it's kind of the same. It's just a feeling. Sometimes it just feels yucky. And that to me just means it doesn't feel right or true. So one thing I would say is, and my team that I work with knows this, there's this film effect that is really popular right now. It's the Super 8, thing on the side. I hate that so much. I'm telling everybody, like, I'm not afraid to say it. I really do not like that. And I just think maybe now that I think about it, it's just not real, and I'm all for doing different sorts of treatments on film and making it look different and trying new things and stuff. But there's just something about that just doesn't feel good to me. And maybe it's because we're faking it. Maybe it's because it's in so many it's everywhere right now. So I don't love that either because I like to be unique. So it's like, I don't want to look like everybody else. So I don't know, maybe that's a good example. And even as we're reviewing this film that we're working on right now, it's in there. And one of my notes was, hey guys, I know you know that I hate this. I have to call it out again. And it'll probably make it into the film, and that's fine, But I think for me, I just have, even though they've heard it before, I just need to say it again. And maybe that's just who I am and how I keep that authenticity radar or barometer, or whatever you want to call it, in check, is I have to at least just say something about it,
Yeah.
No, that's a good example.
No, that's a good one. That's a funny one because I'm the same way. And it's also like it's not hard to shoot Super 8 now.
Yeah.
Like it's easy.
Yeah.
We had a campaign a couple years ago and they were like, they wanted a film look.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we're going to film it on film then.
See?
And then,
Yay.
and then that thing is there,
Yeah.
but it's actually on the film.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm okay. Still didn't love it,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because it looks like a gimmick, it's,
Yeah.
but it's that funny balance of chasing the mainstream thing when cycles happen, right?
And if you're going to use it, then use it in a way that feels true to what, are you doing flashback footage? Or are you talking about something that happened back then? Like why are you using it? Instead of just, here's just a treatment that we could throw on it,
Yeah.
So,
what does the future of Brooks storytelling look like? You're entering into this docu-style world, have a long form piece coming out of the commercial pieces as well. What are you enjoying in that process, and what is it? And is it giving you the confidence to do other things in that space?
Yeah. What does the future look like? I've been at Brooks almost 5 years, and over my time there, I've seen I work on mostly our global campaigns. I kind of touch everything, just overseeing the team, but a lot of work on our global campaigns. And I've really seen that evolve from just being commercials, 30s, 6s, 15s, to how is this going to show up on social? How is this going to show up at an event? And really thinking about the whole ecosystem of everything that we're putting out there, and how can we create content that's for this particular channel, right? And that has definitely been a change. And I think for me, I feel very excited about it. But I think for some people on the team who are very traditionally advertising, it's an adjustment to learn how to tell things in a different way. But now on this campaign that we're just launching, or just launched, depending on when this airs, we have a full suite of content. So we have 230s, we have 15s, we have 6s, we have 4 1-minute docu-styles that are each focused on one of the run crews that we ran with. We have the long form that we're making. We have a lot of photography. So we are doing a lot of different things and getting the most out of, if we're going to go out, and this is something I'm like, my CMO and I talked about, of if we're going to go out and capture all of this, how can we get the most out of that? And that's really what we've done now on this campaign, I think. We haven't done as much audio storytelling, so I think it'll be interesting to see if we can do some of that. We do have Des Linden, who's one of our athletes, and Kara Goucher have a podcast. So, we are doing that at Brooks, but we haven't done that as much on my team. And so maybe there's some of that in the future, but I think it's just really this sort of well-rounded content strategy. How do we make things for certain channels, and pay attention to what resonates with people, so that we can give them more of what they want to see from us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, before I let you go, I've
Okay.
got my 5 rapid fire that aren't as
Okay.
rapid as
All right.
they were intended to be.
Okay.
What is one story that's had an impact on your life, and why? And it can be in a medium. You shared Dan's story, and I feel like that's the one that's in my head for you now.
Yeah.
But what's a story that's had an impact on your life?
Okay, the one that comes to mind, this is rapid. So the first thing that comes to mind is there was this cover of the New Yorker that they partnered with Ira Glass to do an audio story. So talking about audio. So they had done this cover, and it was this interview with this mom. And then they animated this cover to the audio, and he interviewed this mom, and she was talking about her daughter, and I have a teenage daughter. And so this resonates for me in that way. And her daughter was getting ready to go somewhere or something, and she was putting on some makeup. And the mom said to her, "Oh my God, you look so much better." And the daughter says, "Mom, I don't think you're supposed to say that to me." And she said, "You're right." And it's just I don't know, I love that story. I've been teaching at UW on and off, and that's one that I always showed in my class because I just think it's a really authentic, true reaction that this girl had to her mom and how the mom reacted to the girl, combined with this visual animation and kind of the way they told the story visually. I just love it. I can give you the link. You can share it, along with this. I just thought it was really well done and just, could feel what they were feeling in that
Yeah.
moment.
Amazing. What's one film you think everyone should watch?
Mm. Well, one of the ones that I just watched recently that I think is a really powerful story is Spotlight. And that just goes back to my journalism, investigative journalism roots. I think I just think it's really interesting to see the process that they went through. It's a true story of the Boston Globe. For the people that don't know, it's the Boston Globe and how they uncovered the abuse in the Catholic Church. And it just shows their process. And it also acknowledges that they had had the story several years before and it kind of got buried. So they acknowledged that they had done that. And it shows the moments that they had these discoveries. They're in the basement and they find these directories with priests that had this designation, and that was how they discovered who all the priests were. And it created that whole story. I think it said they wrote like 600 stories or something after that, and it created worldwide change. And it's just really well done. And I don't know, I love it because it's just what I'm really interested in and speaks to me in a lot of ways. But I would encourage people to see that.
Yeah.
The other one I'll mention real quick is Lion, which is this film about another true story that got lost in India. And then he was adopted by an Australian couple. And then he found his home in India through Google Maps. So that's a really good story, too.
Amazing. What's something you never leave home without?
Snacks. I am gluten-free and I have an allergy, so I always have something in my bag in case there's not food.
I love it. Where's an important place for you to go to find inspiration?
I would say I get it from art for sure. This last year, I went on this kind of impromptu trip. There was a exhibit at the Louvre, and it was a fashion couture exhibit. And I really love Alexander McQueen, and some of his pieces were in the show. And so I saw that, and I thought, this is really something that I need to go see. I was trying to figure out how to do it, and ended up going on this impromptu trip with this new friend that I made. And we went to London and Paris. And that's kind of an extreme, but just being around with the Alexander McQueen, for example, there's a lot of darkness to his work. He committed suicide. There's darkness for sure, but it's just the depth, and finding things that have that depth is what really speaks to me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Last one is, what is the most important skill for a storyteller to develop?
Maybe following your gut, I would say. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And listen to that. That's what's coming up.
I love it. I'm a big gut follower.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's hard because you say follow your gut, but then anxiety there's a lot of things that can get in the way of your gut and maybe confuse you as to whether it's your gut. But I really do think that you can feel when something just feels off.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't pay attention to that. And so I just think I mentioned this earlier about speaking up. So just speak up, and maybe other people don't agree, and that's totally fine. But I think it's important for you to just goes back to being true to yourself. And I think it's important to say what you think and and not be shy about doing that.
I love it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.